Hello everyone and welcome back to The Bearded Fool Gaming. We're continuing our series today of Aether Revolt spoiler discussions. Had a few viewers yesterday, so hoping that we get some more today. As always, this is going to be talking about the cards that were spoiled today, January 5th, 2017, in the upcoming Magic the Gathering set Aether Revolt. My viewpoints are primarily going to be to those relating to the limited formats of Draft and Sealed, with a little discussion of other formats tossed in. I appreciate any feedback, and again, discussion is greatly appreciated. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start with today's first card. So now what we're looking at here is Hidden Herbalists. This is a good old bear, a 2/2 for 1 in the green, and it simply has a revolt trigger of whenever it comes into play. If you have revolt, then you can add 2 green to your mana pool. So it essentially becomes a free 2/2 if you've triggered revolt. This card seems pretty okay. Like, I'm not going to say it's great, but it doesn't seem like it's bad at all. Most situations, I would say it's going to be a free 2/2, which is better than a lot of other 2/2s. I mean, this is not going to be a high pick card. This is not something that's going to be extremely relevant, but it's just simply a body to get out there early. And if you can get Revolt, then it's, again, basically free. Overall, I think the card there's not really much more to say about it. It's just a bear, and it might be a free bear. Next card up, we have Treasure Keeper. This is a 3/3 for 4. So this is a callback to one of the Eldrazi's in a way that we saw, was it Thought-Knot Seer, I believe? Maybe a different one, I can't remember. But anyway, whenever this guy dies, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal any non-land card with a converted mana cost of 3 or less, and then you get to cast it without paying its mana cost. So this card seems really weird, actually, and I'm not sure exactly how it's supposed to be used to its full potential. I mean, it seems really solid, though. A 3/3 for 4 is not the best, but it's not awful. And considering that whenever it dies, you're going to get to play something for free, it's always going to replace itself if it's not for a spell, with some creature or something. It just seems really solid because of that. Now, it's not going to be as good if you're using like counter magic and things like that, and get one of those off the top. That's going to be very disappointing. But if it replaces itself with another creature, maybe you pull out a one of that 2/3 Death Touch Lifelink or something. I mean, that'd be awesome to replace it with, And there's a lot of really good 3 or less cards in this format, so I definitely see this being a pretty high draft pick card because it'll just go in every deck, basically. As far as seal play, I don't see any reason not to play it. And in Constructed, I feel like it might have potential if there's some way to set up either a combo or maybe you somehow have a deck where it has very few targets to reveal and you just get that immediately for like a tutor effect. I'm not sure if that's possible, and I'm not sure if this card is really that good outside of Limited, but in a limited environment, again, I mean, I think this is what we like to see. This is value on a card, and it's colorless, so this is going to go in a lot of decks, and again, there's no reason not to play it. The next card up we have doesn't have a picture, unfortunately, but this is Lifecrafter's Bestiary. So this is an artifact for 3 with, at the beginning of your upkeep, you scry 1. That's already kind of decent. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, you can pay green to draw a card. So this card, well, in general, seems pretty good. Now, it is a card that kind of does nothing to advance your game, but from a limited standpoint, scrying is a really powerful ability, and considering you get one every time before you draw, that's pretty strong. This is a 3-drop, so it is a little bit of a cloggy card because a lot of really good 3-drops in Aether Revolt Limited. And the second ability is pretty good, though, too. So anytime you play a creature, you can just pay an extra green to draw a card, and I think that's really strong. Again, thinking of Limited, drawing cards is, again, super powerful. So every time you cast one of your creatures, you're most likely going to have some extra mana, especially towards the mid and late game, so you just draw a card. I could see this being pretty bomby. Honestly, if you get this and you go into a late game stall or something, you're going to win the game because you're always going to have fixed draws, you're going to have extra draws, and you will win more of attrition. As far as the constructed, I don't know if it's good enough because it is slow. Again, 3-drop is not a position where you want to not have any immediate impact on the game. I do see the card as potentially being used in something like maybe, Commander, but I don't see this being used in Standard really, personally. Maybe I'm under-evaluating it, but as it currently stands, the format is too fast, and unless Aether Revolt really slows it down, which I don't think it's going to, this just won't have a place. So again, if I get this in Limited, I'm going to be happy to play it, but there are better and worse things out there, so we'll just see where this goes. Next up, we have the Hope of Giriper, one of the weirder cards in the set. This is a 1/1 legendary artifact creature, a Thopter, a 1/1 for 1. Of course, that's flying. And its ability is that you sacrifice it, and until your next turn, a player who was dealt combat damage by the Hope of Giriper can't cast non-creature spells. That's a little complicated, so let's repeat that. So essentially, if Hope of Giriper does damage to a player, so it does have to do it to a player, not something they control, then you just sacrifice the artifact, and then until your next turn, which could include the rest of your current turn, into your opponent's, all the way through your opponent's turn to your next turn, they can't cast any non-creature. So the immediate implication of this is that, oh, I can make everything counterproof, and that's true. This does allow you to essentially make everything in your main phase 2 and everything in your opponent's turn completely uncounterable. And that seems really strong against control. So this seems like a card that we're going to see in some sideboards. It's already moderately aggressively costed at 1 mana for a 1/1 flyer. It's a Thopter, so that has some implications in Limited and if Thopter decks or anything come out and a thing. And it's just a really interesting ability. Now, what else is interesting is this also can set you up to avoid removal spells, board wipes. There's just so many things that this does, and it just seems like one of those absurdly good cards that's probably going to be used in multiple formats. I mean, I can see something like this potentially having a place maybe even in Legacy and Vintage, Those don't really use a lot of small creatures and such, but this seems like something that maybe could have a place to get through, Force of Wills and things like that. Commander, I mean, this could even be a weird little commander in like some type of artifact deck. I don't know if that would be good, but I mean, honestly, that seems pretty crazy. Hey, that person can't cast any spells. Now, it does require a little bit of setup with the dealing of combat damage and things like that, but even with that, I just don't have a problem with it. I think it's a very solid card. I think it's going to shine in Constructed more than Limited. In Limited, I think it's a little less impactful because, one, you don't have the initial idea of making things uncounterable because counterspells aren't really prevalent in Limited formats. And a lot of times it's creatures is what they're going to be playing. So I'm actually really hopeful, I get a Hope of Giriper hopeful, to see this card do some great things. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this in many, many decks from now and years to come. Next up, we have Heroic Intervention. This is an instant for 1 and a green, and it makes all of your permanents indestructible and hexproof until end of turn. So this is an anti-board wipe. This is a counter spell for targeted removal, and it seems pretty interesting. It's kind of cool to be able to have a Selfless Spirit for not only your creatures, but for all of your permanents. Now, that can protect all of your artifacts from like a big artifact wipe, and there's just a lot of things that you can do with this, honestly. This is an amazing combat trick. Let me swing into your board and, make everything of mine indestructible. I've just won the game, probably. So this has a lot of limited implications, but a lot of constructed implications too. Again, I'm not super familiar with older formats, but I wonder if this isn't going to have some type of place in maybe something like the Infect decks, maybe some, aggro decks in Modern, and if Frontier continues to pick up in popularity, I could see it having a place there. I could see this almost replacing Selfless Spirit also in a lot of decks, because it's just instant speed and just such a surprise factor there, Selfless Spirit is kind of easy to play around, and this has the again, the surprise factor, so it can't be played around as well. So this card I see to be absolutely awesome in Limited and really good in Constructed, and this is a card, again, I think we'll be seeing quite a bit of throughout the future. Next up, we have Aether Sphere Harvester. This is a vehicle. It's a 3/5 for 3 with flying. So whenever you play it, you automatically get 2 energy. You can pay an energy to give it lifelink, and it crews for 1. So now it's a 3/5 flyer. The crewing for 1 is not bad at all. The energy and lifelink aspect of it, I would say, is good, but it's nothing special. It is kind of cool to have a colorless energy maker. It's going to go in a lot of different decks potentially if energy decks pick up. But overall, the vehicle deck and energy sub-themes don't really usually go together at this point, at least. Maybe that's something they're trying to push for or something, I'm not sure. But that just doesn't seem like something that naturally wants to be in the same type of constructed deck. In a limited format, though, of course, lifelink is super relevant. And if you do have an energy, recurable energy source or something like that, having a 3/5 lifelink for 3 essentially is going to be pretty strong. So I'm not like amazed by this card, but I think it's solid, and I think it'll see some play in Limited for sure, and maybe in some type of energy constructed deck. Keyword maybe there. Next up, we have a Johnny's Aid. This is an enchantment for 2 Agree in the White. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you can search your library and graveyard for a Johnny Valiant Protector, reveal it, put it in your hand. And then the ability of the card itself is to sacrifice it and prevent all combat damage a creature of your choice would deal this turn. So now this is obviously one of those cards that comes in the bad Planeswalker decks. It tutors out the bad Planeswalker and things like that. And of course this card is meant to be bad, and it is. Unless a Johnny Valiant Protector somehow turned out to be a good card, which is very, very unlikely to happen. Even then, I don't think this card would be good at 4 mana. And considering its ability is to stop 1 creature, 1 turn, it's not good. There's nothing good about this card. There's not much to say about it. This is a bad enchantment. This is a bad card in a bad Planeswalker deck. And I really wish Wizards would quit printing them because people don't want bad cards. There are ways to do what you're wanting to do with the Planeswalker decks without making really bad cards. Now, I'm a fan of bad cards when they fit into, the limited environment and things like that. But in something like this, it's just silly. There's no reason for this card to exist, really. So, definitely a still of disapproval on this one. This is not the type of cards that we want to see. Next up, I believe we have another from the Planeswalker deck, and this is Johnny's Comrade. So now this guy is a 2/2 for 2 with Trample, so he's already a better bear. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control a Johnny Planeswalker, he gets a +1 counter. So now this is a card that is not awful. A 2/2 for 2 is not good, and a 2/2 Trampler for 2 is not much better. The Planeswalker ability is pretty irrelevant, honestly. So I don't think this card is good by any means, but this is a little better than like the card we just looked at, and I'm okay with something like this in like a an introductory deck. It's kind of a fun ability, I guess, to kind of get your Planeswalker, and then all of a sudden you start getting this guy that gets bigger and bigger, and he's a Trampler, things like that. But this doesn't have any implications for Limited and Draft or anything like that, so I can't really speak on that regard. It's obviously not going to go in any constructed deck unless somehow, again, a Johnny's super popular. And even then, this is not going to go there. I mean, a 2/2 for 2, that even if it became a 3/3, just in general, it's just, nah. I mean, if you did have a Johnny already out, you could play this and immediately become a 3/3 on your combat, but still yet. 3/3 for 2 is still nothing to write home about, so. Better than what we have seen in the Planeswalker decks, but nothing special here. Next up, we have Inspiring Roar. So now this is a sorcery for 3 and a white. Once again, I believe this is from the Planeswalker deck. And this is simply put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. If this costed less, this would potentially be a good card. As a 4-of that requires, as a 4-drop that requires other cards to be already in play, in that you need multiple creatures to make this card good, it's not good naturally. I'm not going to say it's the worst card that we've seen in the Planeswalker deck because it's not, but this is not going to go in any constructed decks, and this is not going to be in limited and draft. So again, it's just what it is. It's a card in the Planeswalker deck. It's designed to be bad, and it's mediocre. As always, it's a mediocre card designed to be mediocre, and so it is mediocre. And that is the essentials of the Planeswalker decks. So the next card we have is Tranquil Expanse. So they decided to do this little common cycle of lands, and they're just simple enter the battlefield tap lands. There's the green-white one here. It's good to see these because you know, Kaladesh and Aether Revolt didn't have a lot of mana fixing. So this is going to give you a lot more potential to make the multicolored decks, which it seems like they're kind of pushing for that a little bit in Aether Revolt. So that'll be fun to add a little more variety to the environments. I'm always happy to see a little bit of color fixing, and I think there's just the right amount in Kaladesh and Aether Revolt. So moving on to an actual card here. This is from the Tezzeret Bad Planeswalker deck. And this is a sorcery for 3, a blue and a black. You destroy a creature, and you can search your library for a Tezzeret, and then that's it. So it's 5 mana kill spell, and you can tutor for Tezzeret. And keep in mind that's the bad Tezzeret, who is actually basically as good as the good Tezzeret, kind of. But regardless, this is just it's not a good card in general. Like, this is a 5 mana sorcery speed removal spell, and again, it's so frustrating because I know I'm repeating myself, but it's just a bad card designed to be bad. How can you say anything good about this? And this card doesn't deserve the rare symbol. I mean, I know that it's a theme, but come on. Come on, Wizards. You can do better than this. You can do better than this. Moving on, we have nope, already did that one. Tezzeret's Simulacrum. So now this is a 2/3 for 3, and its ability is to tap, target opponent loses a life, and if you have a Tezzeret Planeswalker, player loses 3 life instead. So this is pretty weird because it kind of almost seems decent, and it would be good in Limited, but we can't get it in Limited because it's in the Planeswalker deck. And I get the Planeswalker decks are somewhat designed to be played against each other, and this seems like a decent card for that type of thing, but otherwise it's just so bad. Like, this is not going to go in anything constructed, and it's another card that is designed to be bad. I would love to see this in Limited. I think it'd be hilarious if you got a Tezzeret and this in Limited, but it just can't happen. So it's disappointment in that regard, and this card is just, it's just bad. So we'll just move right along from that. Next up we have Pendulum of Patterns. I believe we're finally back into the actual cards of the set, but this might be one of the ones from the Planeswalker deck still. Yeah, it looks like it is at 192, 184. It looks like this is a Planeswalker deck card. And again, this is bottom of the barrel here. So it's an artifact for 2, that when it enters the battlefield you gain 3 life, and you can pay 5 to sack it and draw a card. Yeah, I'm going to pay 7 mana to gain 3 life and draw a card? No thanks. Now, I said the other cards were designed to be bad and are bad. This card is designed to be bad and is worse. Garbage. Trash. Total garbage right here. I don't want to see cards like this. I don't care if they're just in the Planeswalker decks. I don't want to see cards like this. It's just disappointing. Next up we have the blue-black land. This, I believe, comes in the Planeswalker decks also. So that's whatever. Now I think we're finally back into the actual set. And now we've got an interesting card. So now this is Metallic Rebuke. It's an interesting card. So this is a 2 and a blue instant, mana leak. It counters target spell unless its control pays 3. So what makes this card really cool is it has Improvise. So for 3 mana, you get a mediocre counterspell that's worse than counterspells we already have in Standard, you know, with, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but there's one, there's a couple different ones that are like counter unless they pay 4, and just, you know, a lot of just generic 3-mana counter spells out there. So, but if you are able to improvise this for even 1, you have a mana leak, and we all know mana leak is an awesome card. And then if you improvise it for 2, you've got a 1-mana counterspell. And those are pretty hard to come by for a generic counterspell like this. So I think this card's going to have a lot of playability in Constructed, and I could actually see this being one of the few counterspells that I would be potentially playing in Limited, especially since I'm going to have those artifacts to improvise with most likely. You know, if I end up making my blue-white tokens deck that I'm thinking about, oh, this is going in as a 4 for sure, because it just seems awesome. And I really like the card. I mean, I think it's cool whenever they give us good counterspells, even if they are situationally good. You know, I would like us to go back to a better time when counterspells were good, but, you know, it is what it is. I understand their reasoning for the way they make counterspells now. Overall, I'm really satisfied with this card, and I expect to see it to have a lot of play in the future. Probably not anything outside of Standard, but I think Standard will use this card if the artifact decks are as prevalent as I think they could be. Next up we have Ravenous Intruder. So this is a 1/2 gremlin for 2 that you can sack an artifact to give it +2/+2. Obviously this is made just for Limited, and it seems pretty decent. 1/2 for 2 is eh, but if you are able to you know, get this through unblocked or something, it's a potential game winner because you can just sack the board to win. And it's always good to have little game finishers like that, and this guy's fine at playing that role. You know, even if you have some type of token recur, you know, maybe you have something making a token each turn, then this guy turns into essentially a guaranteed 3/4 for 2, and that's pretty solid. So I like this card. I don't really have any big complaints on it. I think the art's really cool, obviously, and I think this will be a decent little card that we'll see in Limited from time to time. Don't think it has any constructive playability by any stretch, but I'll be happy to play this if I'm in red. It's also a 2-drop, which is a little less than what we've seen a little less of those, and we have 3-drops and such, so that's nice to see also. Next up, we've got Maverick Thopterist. So this is a 2/2 for 3, a blue, and a red. And it's similar to our friend from Kaladesh. He enters the battlefield and creates 2 Thopters. But this guy doesn't have flying himself, has some power, and has improvise. So now, the guy from Kaladesh is atrocious. He's a 5-drop, 0/2 that creates 2 Thopters, and he's just really, really bad. This guy creates 4/2 worth of power and toughness between him and his creatures, and he can cost a lot less. You know, at 3 a blue and a red, a 2/2 and 2 1/1s is a little mediocre. At 2 a blue and a red, it's decent, and then anything below that I would say is actually pretty solid. Especially if you're able to play just a blue and a red for 3 creatures with 4 power total. Seems pretty strong. You can get double ETBs from artifacts, artifact targets to sack, just a lot of things like that. So this guy seems decent in that deck. Constructed playability is non-existent unless there's some combo, you know, blinking combo or something like that. And just in general, I don't see anything super duper special about this, but it just seems like a solid card to get a couple creatures out and such in Limited. Next up, we have Efficient Construction. This is a enchantment for 3 and a blue, and it's simply whenever you cast an artifact, you get a Thopter. If it costs less, I would say it's pretty good, but as a 4-drop, I don't think this is that good. This seems like it could be used in some type of combo, maybe. I don't think it's going to be good enough to even do that, but as is, it's not the worst card I've ever seen. You know, it does make flyers. It's better than... Well, no, I can't say better. It's similar to kind of Whirler Maker in that it's probably not going to fit in any decks, but it kind of can work. But this requires a lot of artifacts to even do anything relevant, so I don't think this is really that good. And if it was whenever an artifact ETBs, I would say it's a lot better, but as is, it just doesn't really offer that much. A 4-drop that has no immediate effect and requires a lot of other cards to really be relevant just isn't playable in my opinion. So this will probably be a janky card that really won't see any play anywhere ever. Next up, we've got Universal Solvent. So now this is an artifact for 1, which is always nice, and it's a pretty cool card. It's simply 7 tap, sack, destroy a permanent. So now 7 is a lot of mana, but now this format doesn't have a lot of mana sinks, and this is a colorless removal spell, so any deck can play it. It's a tricky card because Kaladesh Limited has been pretty fast, so even getting to 7 mana to kill one thing would probably not be worth it. But if Aether Revolt Limited is slower, which it might be, I'm not convinced it will be, but it might be, then maybe this card could have a place. As is, I think it's just a little too expensive. But I do like a lot of things about what it does. It feels like an older Magic card. Like, this seems like something that we would have seen back in the early days of Magic. Just something like this, you know, a crazy amount to put into it and just destroy something generic, and it's just cool. I do like that it can hit lands because I'm a big fan of land destruction, and it just, you know, it's there in case you need that removal spell. If there's some way to ramp to it or something, it would probably be better, of course, but constructed playability, non-existent, unless it's used in something weird like Tron or something, but I don't think it's good enough for that. And overall, it just seems like an option, but not usually a good one. Next up, we have Herald of Anguish. This is a 5/5 flyer for 7, that's 5 and 2 black. It does have Improvise, and at the beginning of your end step, each opponent discards a card. You can pay 2, sacrifice an artifact, and it gets, or any creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So now this guy's obviously a super big limited mythic bomb, and rightfully so. He's a 7 mana, so he better be good, and a 5/5 flyer is already pretty strong. With the Improvise on him, it makes him pretty interesting, because if you can drop this guy for 5 mana, that is really, really good. A 5/5 flyer for 5 that makes your opponent discard a card at the end of turn and has built-in removal, that's pretty crazy. So this guy's obviously, you know, insta-play black if you get him, and rightfully so, you know, he's a super bomb. As far as constructed playability, I don't think he's going to fit anywhere. He's a little too high-costed. Now, maybe there's an improvised deck that can use him. I don't see a black improvised deck existing, really. Maybe he's a reanimator spell. I don't think so. I think he's really more of something for, like, EDH or something. I think he'd be pretty cool in a black EDH deck, just to have each of your opponents discarding and such, and seems pretty strong for something like that. It would also be pretty cool to see this guy in 2-headed Giant, because he is just going to make... you know, each of them discard a card, so that would be pretty cool in that too. Overall, a solid card. Not a big fan of it, like, personally, but I do like what it's doing here, and I like the potential that it has to just be that big mythic bomb that people like to see and like to play. Next up, we have Aether Inspector. So now this is a 2/3 for 4, has Vigilance. And whenever it enters battlefield, it gets 2 energy, and when it attacks, you can pay 2 energy to create a servo. So this guy reminds me of the cycle from the, you know, the Thriving cycle that we saw in Kaladesh, and this is kind of the second cousin to Thriving Ibex. Although I would probably say Ibex is better than this guy, and Ibex was already kind of bad. Now this guy does have Vigilance, so that's not something to just gloss over. But Vigilance isn't the most relevant ability. It's good, but you know, it can live and die without it. The fact it makes a servo for 2 energy on attacking, it's whatever. I think there's just better cards. You know, I think this is no more than a curve filler, no constructed playability, but as it is, it creates energy in white. It allows you to put that energy into making more creatures, so it feels white, and it's just a decent little card. Nothing to write home about, just it's a curve filler if you need it. Next up, we have Aether Swooper. So now this is a similar card, but in my opinion, much better. So now this is a 1/2 flyer for 2. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy, and whenever it attacks, you can pay 2 to create a servo. So obviously, this is very similar to his brother that we just looked at there, but this guy has flying, and he's also a 2-drop. This is a lot more relevant. Blue already has quite a bit of energy makers, and considering that this is potentially an extra creature on turn 3, is a lot better than an extra creature on turn 5. He's also flying naturally himself, and it just seems like a solid card. You know, he is 1-2, which is whatever, but he doesn't die to Thopters, and that's the primary thing that's going to be blocking you. Now, he can't get through an Ornithopter, of course, but he can get through regular Thopters, and that's always good. So this guy I actually like, and I think this guy's decent. I don't think he's super duper strong, but I don't have any complaints. I want to play this card. It's a good 2-drop slot, and just seems pretty overall solid. Next up, we have Karikev Skyship Raider. This is a 1-3 for 1 of the red, legendary creature. There you go, Commander players. And she has a monkey on her shoulder, I just realized. That's awesome. So anyway, this is a human pirate. So whenever she attacks, you create a legendary 2-1 red monkey creature named Ragavan that's tapped and attacking. So this is obviously a flavorful card, and I actually never read that ability in detail until just now, so that's pretty awesome. This is my true first impressions. First impression is I love this card. Freaking just get a random attacking monkey with you. That's awesome. And considering she is also first strike and menace, pretty crazy strong just in that regard. So this seems really good and limited. As far as constructed playability, I'm not sure. A 1-3 is not aggressive enough. First strike and menace is whatever, and monkey, I don't know. She is essentially a 3-3 when she's attacking for 2, so that seems pretty decent. That's a card that I'm going to have to really look into to really give a proper evaluation on, but overall, I really like the card. It just seems fun. It's a funny card, and who doesn't want to have a pirate that sends a monkey to attack? I mean, what's not to love? I like this card, Wizards. This is a good design card. It's fun, funny. I like it. So next up, we have Karikev's Expertise. This is the red Expertise, finally. So now this is simply gain control of target creature or vehicle and tap it against haste, you know, the normal hijack. But then you get to cast a free 2-drop or less. So hey, I'll go ahead and take your creature, give it haste, attack you with it, and heck, I'll go ahead and drop out Kari Zev here. So that's pretty cool. Hijack abilities are generally pretty bad, but this one I think is actually strong. Because the thing about hijack abilities that make them bad are that you don't gain anything. Yes, you can force your opponent to lose, you can force your opponent to do an unfavorable block, to trade his own creatures off, things like that, but it's really situational. This is guaranteed to give you something. You're playing it for 3, and you're getting your 2-drop. So this is basically a 1-mana hijack, and that's pretty awesome. A 1-mana hijack completely changes things. So say you gain control of one of their creatures, and heck, I'll drop this shock out there and pop off your other creature. That seems pretty good to me. And I actually like this card. I don't think it's necessarily bomb territory, but I would say this is relatively high pick if you're already in red, because it just is going to allow you to do a lot of shenanigans. Overall, I think this is a well-designed card, and I think it's strong, nowhere near overpowered, but it's very nice to see this a card like this. And kudos to anyone who can get Karizev off of Karizev's Expertise. It just seems like a beautiful moment. So next up we have Aether Poisoner. So now this is a creature, a 1/1 for 2 with Death Touch. It's one of those whenever it enters you get the energy, whenever it attacks you get a servo. So this is the black one in that cycle. So now a 1/1 Death Touch for 2 is not that good. Death Touch is a neat ability, and this guy is a good blocker, but that's all he's going to offer you. With no evasion, you know, a 1/1 is going to get chunked by a servo, and he may make you a servo in return or something, but I'm not impressed by this at all. The 2 energy in black is something, I guess, but, you know, this is not something that you really want to... Essentially, this is going to turn into a lot of 2 mana make a servo. You know, let me play this guy, attack with him, maybe kill your servo, and it just doesn't seem good. I don't think this card is that strong. I don't think it's unplayable, but I'm not excited if I have to play this in my curve. Let me put it that way. Next up we have Aether Chasers. Now this is the red one in this cycle. So this is a 2/1 first strike for 2, and it gets the energy whenever it attacks. It creates a servo. Now first strike is a lot more relevant than Death Touch. First strike on a 2/1 is even more relevant. This guy seems pretty solid at first glance. It's also an Artificer. I'm not sure if they all were Artificers, but I guess they were, yeah. So a 2/1 first strike is already pretty strong. Getting 2 energy in red is pretty strong. And the ability to spend that energy to create a servo in red is pretty strong. So this guy seems like he'll be a lot more playable than the other Aether blanks that we've seen. And I like this guy. I like first strike in limited. I like the abilities here. And I don't really have anything to complain about. Moving along, we have one final card here, and that is the final of this cycle. This is the green Aether Herder. So now this is simply a 3/3 that get 2 energy when we play it, and you can attack with it to make a servo. First impressions here are kind of meh. 3/3 for 4 is meh. There's a lot of 3/2s for 3, so 3/3 for 4 isn't anything to write home about. And just in general, the servo line here is not something that I'm super impressed with. Getting 2 energy in green is somewhat good, but there's other cards that just do it better. Like, I mean, when you got things like Thriving Rhino and Long Tusk Cub that you may be playing with, and the Elephant that you can get, it just doesn't seem good at all. I like that it's an Artificer. I like this cycle. I think they're kind of cool, but hey, this is not a good card. It needs Trample or something. Like, it's just so meh when I look at this. So overall, I have to say that cycle's a bit of a dud, but you know, Chaser is definitely the high point of the cycle for sure, with the blue one in second place. So overall, looking at the cards we've seen today, probably Karzev is for sure my favorite. Who doesn't love a legendary monkey? I can't get over that. Awesome. So awesome. But anyway, you know, here we are. We've only got about 70 more cards to go through, so this will definitely keep us busy for the next week or so. And I'm going to continue to try to do one of these videos each evening to discuss, you know, what's been revealed. So as always, if you guys have any feedback on the stream or any feedback as to what you would like me to discuss in detail, if you have any opinions on cards that you disagree with me on or agree with me on, just let me know. I like feedback. And likes and subscribes, of course, are that fuel to keep me going. So, as always, I will be back hopefully tomorrow. If I'm not, I might be playing Magic tomorrow, so I'm not sure. Maybe really late tomorrow or really early if I do a stream tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. But for now, this is TheBeardedFool, and I am signing off. I will catch you guys next time.